Hello, it's Tom Donald from the London Contemporary School of Piano. Today we are going to learn how to bring our chords to life, truly bring them to life with 4-part harmony. Now today's video we're going to be going over some academic or some more classical principles, but these principles are so important in giving us a more 3 or even 4-dimensional look into chords and music. Think of this like inversions, but inversions on steroids. And by the way, if you are a fan of our work at the London Contemporary School of Piano, do head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, because we have our special 4-part harmony pack, which is part of our resources kit. And you can claim the free resources kit on our website by visiting our site and signing up for that, as well as getting some daily email tips to help really move your piano playing forward. So, 4-part harmony, why is it so important? Well, it's a classical concept. It's such a classical concept it goes back even into the early polyphony of the Renaissance period. And what actually happened in that development of Western music, all of those centuries of musical development that came from choir music, is what has led to today, where we have chords. All these chords we take for granted. And having a holistic understanding of that really helps us understand how music works. So bear with me when I talk about some of these rules or some of these principles. I prefer to see them as principles, they're not really rules. They're almost like the DNA of Western music, the science behind how chords fit together and operate. And to do this, I thought we'd make this really special because here I am in Leipzig at the Blüthner Piano Factory. And Leipzig is a place of great musical tradition and heritage. It's where Bach wrote many of his great masterpieces. And I'm sitting here on a Blüthner grand piano from the Romantic period. So this piano is over 100 years old. And so I just think it suits the topics we're talking about. We're going to be talking about the contemporary in the sense of chords and playing songs and what we always talk about, but we're talking about the classical and the contemporary, and we're sort of marrying the two together. And we're going to look at some of these traditions in 4-part harmony. Now, this is still used in modern music today. Any arranger has to know this stuff. If they're arranging for a string quartet, you have to know to have on a track. Think of all those great George Martin string quartet arrangements like Eleanor Rigby. To be able to do stuff like that, you have to know 4-part harmony. You have to know 4-part harmony if you want to write for a big band, if you want to write for an orchestra, if you want to be an arranger, you just have to know 4-part harmony. So these are really important skills because 4-part harmony trains us to think of chords not just as chord, 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 as in clunks. It trains us to think about chords as moving organisms where there are voices and they're all singing together like a choir, because chords were invented by choir. So this stuff is really, really important. Now, for today's example of 4-part harmony, I was going to give us a Bach piece, but I thought I'd go a little bit more contemporary to Bach, to the Romantic period, and a piece by Schumann, because I am playing on an instrument from Schumann's era. But we're going to analyse the chords of this piece, and then we're going to try some more jazzier chords following these 4-part harmony principles. But before we get to the jazzy chords, let's look at this piece I've selected by Schumann. It's called Ein Choral, and it's from his work called Album for the Young. And it's a very simple 4-part harmony arrangement. Again, it's in our resources kit, so visit our resources kit at contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, request it, so you can get your hands on this and study it. So I'm going to play the first few phrases, and you'll see the analysis of the chords, you'll see what the chords are, but you'll also see how beautifully they're moving together. So let me play it first on this beautiful piano. So before I continue further, let's analyse not just what these chords are, but how they're put together, because this is really important. This is what we call SATB writing. Soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Chords come from choirs. The voice invented this stuff before instruments were able to play it. It's really mind-blowing if you think about it. So we are following this tradition of choir-like music, but on a piano. Schumann has written this for a piano. But you'll notice the stems are pointing in different direction. For instance, that top note that the sopranos are singing, the stem's pointing up. And then in the treble clef, that bottom note is the alto. The stem's pointing down, and the tenor's pointing up in the bass clef, and the bass is pointing down. So I'm going to play that first phrase again, but I'm only going to play the soprano part, and you'll hear that it is this lovely melody. And then I'll get to the rules and principles of four-part writing, which is going to blow your mind. So we have these lovely chords, but here is the melody that appears as a result of these chords. You have this lovely moving soprano line. I'm just joking, I'm not going to sing soprano for you, but you get that idea, you get that lovely vocal line. And then the alto part is much more repetitive, it's sort of the glue of the chord. And then you have this tenor, which, like the soprano, is very melodic. And the tenor is this. And then you have the bass. So the genius of four-part harmony is you get these chords, but if you follow the following principles that I'm going to tell you about now, something miraculous occurs. You get four independent melodies that are singing at exactly the same time to formulate the chords. So not only you're creating a chord progression, you are creating four independent melodies that all join together like a perfect jigsaw puzzle. By themselves, they just sound like nice melodies, but you join them together and you get these beautiful chords. And these are not fancy ninth chords that you hear in jazz. These are just simple triadic chords with some occasional sevenths and occasional inversions. So we end up with things like G major, D major in first inversion, G major, D major, A7 starting on the E, D major, A major, D major. So behind all that elegance and complexity, there's also a simplicity there too. You don't need complex chords to make beautiful harmony. In fact, that's the genius behind this. You can arrange beautiful chords with simple triads. So what are the principles that create these four independent melodies? And you can start experimenting with this, even on manuscript paper. Start writing this out, giving yourself exercises, making up chord progressions, and seeing if you can arrange them and follow these principles. So this is four-part harmony. That means we have four voices. But when we have a triad, like a G major chord, like this one here, a triad has three notes. So we can double up a note. We have to double up a note. If it's not a seventh chord, if it is a seventh chord or it has extra dissonance, well then we don't have to double up a note because we've got four notes in a seventh chord, like a D7. But if it's a triad like G major, and I've got four voices, something can double up. And that's where we have a few rules and principles. And this is where we get to the heart of the science of harmony and chords. So if you're still with me now, you haven't gone like, oh my gosh, this is too academic. You are about to see some big breakthroughs in your understanding of music. So stay with me. You know, I'm being a taskmaster today. So this is our G major chord. What notes are we allowed to double up? So we're allowed to double up, for instance, the root note, the G. And we're also, if we wanted to, as an alternative, we could double up the D. I could play the G major chord like this in four-part harmony. That's totally fine. So rule or principle number one, you can double up the root note and you can double up the fifth. That's principle number two. You can double up the fifth. You can double the root. You can double the fifth. Both are acceptable. But if it's a major chord This is rule or principle number 3. If it's a major chord, you can't double the third. Too much sugar, right? It's a sweet enough sound, the third. It's just overpowering to double the third. And of course, these rules are often broken in the context of big, bolsterous piano music, but we're talking about arrangement here, so just stay with me. So we need flexibility with the rules, but these rules apply to 4-part harmony and arrangement, and really sophisticated arrangement. So yes, we're not going to double the third. That's the third rule. Just to make it a little bit more confusing, if it's a minor chord, we can double the third. That's okay, because minor has a very different sound. There's no sugar in the minor, so we're not going to get a sugar overload. But that's a sugar overload. We'd prefer to have something like this, or we'd prefer to have something like this. So you can double the root, you can't double the major third, but you can double the minor third, and you can double the fifth. Now here's another rule to add to that. You can also remove the fifth. You can actually get rid of the fifth, because the fifth is passive. You can have it, or you cannot have it. And if we're pursuing a smooth voicing, there are going to be times where we might need to remove the fifth. So for instance, let me give you an example of a voicing that doesn't have a fifth. What about something like this? There you go. That still has the identity of a G major chord. I didn't need the fifth. And I got that nice spread out octave. Now you would have noticed I tripled the root. That's totally okay. I couldn't triple the third, possibly. I'm not even allowed to double the major third, but I can triple the root. That's totally fine. Now, another rule in 4-part harmony, I hope you're writing all these rules down. Another rule is that all of the voices should be no more than an octave apart. This was okay, but I couldn't do something like this. They go out of range then. If they're over an octave apart, it loses the tightness. But there's an exception. There's a lot of rules here. There's a lot of science going on here, musical science. There is an exception. The bass can go down all the way here. The bass is allowed to go an octave out of range. So I could have something like the G major chord like this, totally fine. Or this, totally fine. See, that's over an octave, but everything else is concise and within the octave range. So it can be an octave apart, but no more than an octave for between the other voices. And so now this gives you an idea of the sort of principles that Schumann or Bach or any composer using 4-part harmony arrangement to bring their chords to life, the sort of rules they're following to get these wonderful effects. So let's look at these chords again with that in mind. I'm going to play it again. And then by following these principles and writing the chords out as smoothly as possible, getting the transition between those chords again, I'm going to do that again, you get that magic of 4 independent voices moving in their own direction. You'll notice sometimes on this score the stem is pointing up and down, like on that 3rd chord, that G major chord. That just means that the bass and the treble have, or tenor, sorry, the bass and the tenor have merged on the same note, which is totally okay. They're allowed to sing the same note. So it's like a 3-part harmony in that sense, but it's still following the principle of 4-part harmony because the bass and the tenor have met on the same note. The basses have done this, la, 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 and the tenor's done this, la, la, la. Here's a nice exercise. I'm going to play the melody and the bass now. Let's hear what that does to the music. You get an outline of those chords just in 2 parts. Now I'll put it all together now. Let's do that again. So you can see it all working in beautiful 4-part harmony. So I'm just bringing out the melody a little bit more. It's really good for your piano playing as well, because just to play music like this not only gives you a better understanding of chords, but a better understanding of voicing and musicality. Listen to that ending there. of that phrase. What happened here? I've got a D major chord, D, the F sharp, the third is in the tenor, the root is in the alto, and the fifth is in the soprano. I've doubled the root, but what does the alto do here? It switches from a D to a C, which turns it in to a D7, resolving back to the G with a tripled root note and a third. And so that's another example of why it would be a good idea to sometimes triple the root. All right, I'm going to play from this next bar here on bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think that's bar 9. Yes, which is a repetition. These chords are so simple, but in this arrangement, they're so incredibly musical. I love those last three chords, the A minor in first inversion. Now, because it's a minor chord, we can double the third, and we have doubled the third. 2 C's there in the bass, E and A, and then a D7. And then the ending, again, we've tripled the root because the soprano and alto have met on the same note. And then we have the bass and the third, and the fifth has been removed. And it's sort of nice without the fifth there, because it just gives it a slightly more thinner tonic chord at the end. It doesn't feel as predictable as a full-blooded chord. So there's beautiful artistry to the arrangement and the application of these principles. Now you can start experimenting with this. Just get a simple chord progression, C, F, G, C, and see if you can compose it in 4-part harmony. And see if you can follow those principles and create a smooth soprano line that's singing nicely, an alto line that's gluing it together, the tenor line that's moving a little bit nicely. No big jumps and leaps. Like inversions, it's got to be very smooth. And the bass can jump around because it's hitting the bass note. If it's C, F, and G, the bass has a little bit more flexibility to move because it's hitting the bass. And so you get this synergy. So give it a go. Now there's another very, very important rule with traditional 4-part harmony, which some of you might have heard of if you took theory lessons as a kid. And the rule is called no parallel octaves and no parallel fifths. Now, what does that mean? Again, in contemporary music, we've relaxed these laws a little bit because they don't always have to apply. But in this type of music, it is quite a serious rule. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's look at the ending of the Schumann here. He did the A minor in first inversion to the D7 to the G. Very musical. One thing he definitely didn't do, though, he didn't do 2 octaves in a row. That's basically what a parallel octave is. That's a no-no. So you can have octaves, that's fine, but don't have 2 in a row. Otherwise, he would have done this. This is 2 octaves in a row. Now, it doesn't sound offensive, but the problem with it is it now feels very clunky and if you think of a choir, you're giving the bass and the tenor the same note and they're just all moving in the same direction. You're not being efficient. You could be more efficient than that. Like you could do something more interesting than that, like this. Create the D7 instead. So Schumann didn't do this. Ugh, this is dull. He did this instead. Now, I know to many of you that you might be like, I can't really hear the difference yet, but let me do it again. Octaves. Now we'll follow some better voicings without the octave. The seventh instead. It's a little bit, I think the difference between this is going to the supermarket and getting a $5 bottle of wine that's, you know, drinking it, it tastes a bit rough around the edges, versus something that is much more refined, much more elegant, and has much more craftsmanship behind it. Something will cost you a bit more from the supermarket, a bit of a tear up. That's there's a musical palette to it, like just the octaves take the essence out of the chord. And that's the same with fifths. He didn't do this. Let's say he wanted to do a C major to a D7 to a C. He's not going to do it like this. I've done all those fifths in a row. It just sounds not what we're looking for, unless we're going back to Gregorian chant, where they first started adding harmony and they had more parallel movements. But when we got to the Renaissance, they wanted music. The music became richer and more, richer and more sophisticated. And so the idea of having just lots of fifths and lots of octaves just moving parallel, was taken out. So let's now construct our own chord progressions. We've played this beautiful bit of Schumann as an example. And the good news with four-part harmony, now these harmonies were very conservative. There were not many seventh chords. There was only the D7, no other seventh chords at all. I think there was an A7 there. So it's very classical harmony. It's just major and minor triads. It actually gets easier to effectively arrange for four-part harmony when you've got more complicated chords, like jazzier chords. That's the good news. It's actually easier. It's harder when you've got your constricted to just major and minor. So if I'm going from C, here's one you could test out for yourself. How can I travel from a C major to an F major? This is like inversions on steroids. C major, F major. That's quite a nice one. Soprano, alto, it's on the same note. Tenor, bass. I'm singing an octave too low. There's your bass. What's another way I could do it? I could spread them out a bit more. There's my C major to my F major. That's a nice one. Now this one is nice because the soprano is left hanging on the same note. Then you got the alto. And then you've got the tenor. Then you've got the bass. So it's just a really good thing to practice. Just choose two chords, any two chords. Even get random chords that have nothing to do with each other. Let me do a random one. And then if I can use four-part harmony to make it sound musical. And this is really cool. I've done this with students on live seminars before, where they have randomly given me a random chord. Different students give me random chords, and I just put them together, and they've got nothing to do with each other, these chords. They haven't been constructed in any way. And four-part harmony makes it sound elegant, smooth, musical and planned, even though the chords were selected at random. That's how powerful these principles are. I'll give you a random one. D7 to A flat major. So it's like a false cadence because a D7 classically leads to a G major, but I'm going to an A flat major. Let's see. Now I've got to look at the common notes. My bass is going to go D to A flat. So right, it's random, right? It's even a tritone. I've got the seventh note. Maybe I'll put that in the tenor. Now if I leave the seventh hanging, I've got an A flat major chord here. When I put the third here in the right hand, what am I going to do then with this one? I might just move it up to the A flat. Okay, now I've got the top note, the soprano. I'm going to make that a D because I've already got the 7th there. So I'm doubling the root. Ooh, this is going to be difficult. This is going to be difficult because I can't go to a C because I'll be doubling the 3rd then. So I've given myself a challenge here. So I think what I'll do is I will take this down to an E flat and have an octave in the right hand between the tenor and the alto. Yeah, like that. There we go. D7, D, C, F sharp, D. So I couldn't end up going to the A flat there. I doubled the 5th instead to avoid doubling the 3rd. Now it sounds really smooth. That should be jerky. That should be really abrupt, but it isn't now. It has been turned into something smooth. I promise you they were totally random chords. Random chords can be rescued by 4-part harmony. That's how powerful these principles are. Now, of course, composers bend the rules with this when they're writing for piano. Beethoven, this is not an evangelical rule, all of these principles. This is just getting into the science of chords. But, when Beethoven wrote his Moonlight Sonata, he's got octaves happening in the left hand, right? They're parallel octaves. Now, and if you're thinking, well, this happens in piano music all the time, so why are you telling us we can't use parallel octaves? Context. See, that is what we call piano-style writing. So the question is, when you're constructing harmony, you have to ask yourself, am I writing harmonically or am I writing pianistically? And composers like Beethoven and Brahms were brilliant at this, at really understanding what are they doing. Oh, I'm being pianistic now, so I can use octaves because I'm milking the piano for its richness, getting extra bass from those octaves. Or, no, I'm writing harmonically, I need efficiency and really beautiful, smooth voicing. And understanding this will really transform your harmony. And let's do it with a couple of jazzy chords. What if we get like a C minor 7 to an F7? It's quite a funky sort of harmony. See, it gets easier when you've got more 7ths because you don't have to worry about doubling and tripling things as much. And you avoid parallel 5ths and octaves, because you've got the 7th there to rescue you, so it gets easier the more complex the harmony is. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So you've got the 7th in the left hand here, the 3rd and the 1st note for the C minor 7. And I've just kept that the same in the right hand. I've got bass, tenor, alto, soprano. Very sophisticated. So, if you had some brass parts on your arrangement, if you're a producer, see, producers that don't know this stuff, they're at a huge disadvantage, because if you want to write a brass part, you're not just going to plonk out notes to the brass players. If you do it in this strategic way, you get a smooth, proper arrangement. D minor 7 to G7. That's nice, isn't it? Back to the C minor to the F7. Works much more efficiently, but I could do it in different ways. I could try it what about like this? I'm going to try and make it more closer voicing. I have the bass and the tenor sharing the same note there. So you can put this out in different ways. And it doesn't have to always be 4 voices. You can add a 5th voice, or you could make it really conservative and really succinct with just 3 voices. Things like this. I love this little walk-up progression. It would normally, in parallels that are unsophisticated, be this. But I could do it with a really sophisticated 3-note only approach. See, even when I play that C major, I've removed the 5th. Let's finish with these ones. These are nice. And that's a D minor 7, just represented by 3 notes. The 1st, the 7th, and the 3rd, no 5th. I've taken out the 5th, which we can do. Let's do this in different keys as well. What about in the key of B flat? Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's 4-part harmony masterclass. I mean, this is heavy stuff, I know, but this is the stuff that's in first, second year university music degrees. In fact, it's even disappearing from a lot of university music degrees, this really, really important theory, which I think is very sad, because this is the science of music. This is the science of harmony. You can be as creative as you want, but you need to have some craft as well. Craft is what gives us creativity. I think Brahms once said, the great German composer Brahms said, without craftsmanship, inspiration is just a mere breeze. A breeze that just gets lost. Don't forget to visit our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, to get our free resources kit that accompany these videos, so you can keep developing your skills. You can learn about these wonderful harmonic principles to bring your music to life. Thank you.